Welcome back to another episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci. I'm excited to launch another episode for you all. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident while walking home from a friend's birthday. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very high pedestal in my life. This transformative experience allowed me to create a podcast that is all things mental health. Would it benefit you to hear from mental health professionals and influencers? Would it also add value to your life to hear real life and authentic stories from people talking about their mental health, the issues they face, and how they actively combat them? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then you came to the right place. I want to start by congratulating you for making your mental health a priority. If you missed the last episode, be sure to download it after you tune in today. On this episode, I am happy to introduce my guest, Jacent Wamala. I met Jacent, as you can probably guess, through networking. She was a referral from an earlier guest on my other podcast series, What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur. She is a first-generation, third-culture woman from Uganda who has a passion for helping others improve their mental health. She currently offers individual and marriage counseling out in the Las Vegas area, where she works with clients to improve the quality of their lives. She has 10 years experience in mental health and 5 already as a marriage and family therapist. Jacent, thank you for coming on my show. And please introduce yourself to our listeners and share part of your story before we dive in and get going. Please share your role relating to mental health as well.
Hey there, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Jacent Wamala. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, which pretty much means I can see individuals, couples, or families. The funny thing is that the majority of our clients happen to be individuals for the most part, but I love focusing on helping people who are feeling kind of stuck in a rut, defeated, down, and unsure of what to do next, find some clarity and purpose so that they can keep moving and pushing forward. So I'm really excited to chat with you today and kind of share some mental health tips.
Jacent, thank you for sharing all of that. I'm excited for you to add value through your expertise in individual marriage counseling and improve everybody's mental health in those related areas. Something I do on each episode is I share the mental health story of someone who is famous because I want to let you, the listeners, know you are not alone. I want you to understand that even though someone looks like they are healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. For today's episode, I will now introduce the mental health related story of Catherine Zeta-Jones from an article I read in ABC. I didn't really know any of this, so I was excited to share with you all, where I found out Zeta-Jones has been treated for bipolar disorder, where she was diagnosed as a level 2. She admitted to a mental health facility for this challenge, and it was discovered that bipolar disorder is also known as manic depressive illness. She chose to go to the facility after helping her husband, fellow actor Michael Douglas, recover from throat cancer. In the article, Dr. Igor Galanker, director of the Family Center for Bipolar Disorder at Beth Israel Medical Center, was quoted saying, "It can start at any time in a person's life and is a lifelong illness." He added, "It's not curable, but it is treatable with medications and psychotherapy. People with bipolar illness can have productive lives like anyone else, but they need to be treated and compliant with that treatment." This type of disorder that she has is characterized by longer low periods, I learned. Jacent, what do you take away from her story relating to mental health?
I think that over the last few years, more recently, more and more celebrities have been open about their mental health conditions and what they've dealt with and how they're managing those things. And I think that it's empowering, just like you said, for everyday people to see that maybe someone that they look up to or that they idolize or follow their story is addressing their mental health concerns. And so I think that it's really brave for Catherine Zeta-Jones and anyone else, not even just a celebrity, anyone that is open about sharing their experience and what they deal with as far as mental health goes. It takes a lot of courage and a vulnerability, because there is a stigma around mental health, and people are obviously going to make assumptions about a person based on what they think they know, because there's also the difference between the clinical terms that, bipolar and everyday life kind of been the definitions have been distorted, and so people don't actually know what these things really look like, and so people think bipolar is like mood disorder or mood swings, and that is not exactly what bipolar is. So I think there's a lot of misinformation, and people are not really actually clear on what these mental health concerns actually look like, which then can become problematic, because if you're dealing with your own mental health concern and you're not sure what the actual symptoms are, how are you supposed to know when you're supposed to get help and things like that? So I think that the more that celebrities kind of talk about their experiences and people are more open to having these conversations, that hopefully it breaks down that stigma to the point that we're all like getting mental health or prioritizing our mental health is just the standard. So I think that there's bravery in it, there's vulnerability. That's, to me, translates as strength, and hopefully promotes mental health and wellness for everyone.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're right on. And, receiving the right information is the battle. There's a lot of information out there, but getting the correct information is such a crucial thing. And we're going to talk about a lot in this episode. But while we're on the topic of bipolar, you said there was some miscommunication, some confusion maybe of what actually bipolar is. Do you want to just enlighten everybody before we hop in?
Yeah. So, I mean, as you said that you had mentioned in reading the article, that bipolar is manic depressive, as opposed to just having depression, if that makes sense. Depression would just be lows consistently over time, whereas bipolar, there's going to be those episodes of mania. So a manic episode,
Right.
it looks different for everybody. A manic episode might be impulsive behavior, whether it's gambling, other high risk behavior like drug, alcohol, spending a lot of money, just being hyper focused on something. So manic episodes are unique to bipolar disorder. And then there's bipolar 1 and 2. And so from the article, it says that she was diagnosed with bipolar 2, which is going to be a little bit different. But, the lows are going to be longer, if that makes sense, where someone is lacking motivation or energy. They don't have much motivation to do anything that they typically have interest in doing. And so those are all good signs for someone, as long as we are self-aware enough to see the differences going on in our own body and in our own behavior, to signify that it might be time to get some help or look into what's going on. So I think it's definitely challenging dealing with like the society's view of what certain mental health disorders are and what they actually look like and are. And so I would just charge everyone to, when you hear things, do a little bit of research with credible sources, and consult so that you actually know what it is that you're kind of talking about or dealing with.
Now, is level 1 more severe than level 2, or level 2 is more severe?
I don't know that it's based on severity. I think it's just the characteristics are different. So I
Okay.
don't know that one is, better or worse than the other, but it's just they have different characteristics, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so that would be how. And being diagnosed with a mental health condition is not a death sentence. It's not, it doesn't have any bearing on who you are as a person. It has nothing to do with your character. It's just what you're
Right.
dealing with. When someone has diabetes, we don't think of them as like the diabetes person or something like that. So
Well
just
said.
because someone is dealing with a mental health condition, just like the article stated, you can have a life that looks normal, and where you're able to continue doing the things that you enjoy and you like, just with the support of whatever your treatment program looks like. And so I think that there's a resistance to getting mental health help because people don't want to be labeled and have to deal with what that comes with. But no one even needs to know your label. If you don't share it, then it's not like you're going to look bipolar, right? Does Catherine Zeta-Jones look bipolar? No, there's no
Yeah,
such
yeah.
thing. So no one has to know what you're dealing with if you don't tell them. That is completely up to each person. Your medical records, your everything that you're dealing with is confidential. Just know that, doctors and therapists are also not going to air your personal business anywhere. Literally, we will
Yes.
get sued. So
Right.
so it's up to each person to kind of decide who they want to disclose with and share that information. It's not a death sentence. It's just a way of figuring out how to help someone manage with what they're dealing with.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for delving deeper into that for everybody. That's some real good insight into bipolar, which is a hot topic in the mental health world, as people, like you said, are unaware of what being bipolar really means. So thank you for clearing that up for everybody. I think it's a perfect time to enter the main event here. Jacent, on each episode, my guest and I will go over this series of 6 questions, which only slightly varies depending on if we're talking about our own or others' mental health. And this lets me deliver as much value as possible. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. So many would agree that the more common or at least talked about types of mental illnesses are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, or schizophrenia disorders. What areas do you come across the most?
So in my practice, I heavily see mostly anxiety and depression. So those are the two main concerns that lead clients into my office. And the way that I, at this point, because I've seen it so much, have come to define anxiety and depression for my clients to understand is when we think of something in the past, it can make us sad. You think of,
Yeah.
when you wish you would have asked somebody on a date or something like that, or when you wish you would have bought a dress or who knows what. But then when we get stuck in the past, when we are replaying it over and over again, and we aren't able to bring ourselves back to the moment, then that leads to depression. It's on a spectrum, right? Which leads to paralysis. So that's why people that are clinically depressed can't get out of bed. They don't really want to, shower, do functional daily habits. It's challenging for them to get started on a project or to see it through. And
Right.
that's because they're paralyzed by being stuck dwelling on the past. When we, on the other end of that, are predicting negative outcomes in the future, then it makes us nervous or worried naturally, right? Because we can't control what's to come. So when we get stuck over analyzing what we think is going to go wrong in the future, then that leads to anxiety, which also leads to paralysis, because that's why they have the saying analysis paralysis, right? When you're just spending so much time thinking of, okay, well, this is going to go wrong if I do this, and that's going to happen, or what if that, all the what if scenarios that we can come up with in our minds, because we're really creative, right? We can create stories in our brains, which is like pro and con, because it can work against us.
Yes, yes.
um, but when we get stuck in the future, then we also experience anxiety. So whether we're in the past or whether we're in the future, neither of those two things exist in the moment, which is kind of what leads me to have like a mindfulness-based program or protocol. That's why mindfulness works, because it's gently bringing yourself back to the moment. So for me, anxiety, depression, those are the two main things that I see in my practice at this point.
Yeah, I like how you broke that down. Thank you so much. That's a lot of great information. Um, when did you realize that you were ready for a career in mental health? You seem so passionate, you seem so knowledgeable, which is great for this show. Was there a moment where you said, "Hey, I'm going down a career relating to mental health"? Describe the picture for everybody listening on.
Well, I was born in Uganda, so I'm first generation. I actually wanted to go to school for performing arts. Family was like, nah, girl, you need to get a legitimate job, right? So they kind of steered me to try something else. I'd always been interested in psychology, just wondering like what makes people tick, how is it that we form relationships, and I am also interested in performance, like what makes people high achieving and high quality performers, which is also kind of psychology. So I studied psychology when I was in my bachelor's, and then I found marriage and family therapy, so I minored in it at the time. And then I wanted to kind of have my own schedule. I'm kind of a free bird. I've got my own authority issues that I deal with. So I wanted to take control of my own schedule by having practice. So it's like, okay, what's a great way to serve people and also serve myself by having a career that I love? And that seemed to be the best of both worlds. So I studied marriage and family therapy for my master's degree, and then I started my practice, and that was it. Helping people kind of master themselves and go within and tap into their potential, which I find really gratifying at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, I like how you said, you kind of found what you're passionate about and you went with that, something that can make you money and make you happy. You stem down the statements from a lot of successful people. It always goes to just being happy. Everybody wants different things out of life. Some people want, more money, more freedom, more travel ability, but it's great because you see them, all your answers, you know what you're talking about, and you see the drive behind that. So I think that can be motivating to our listeners. But to talk to our listeners out here who may not be sure what's going on, they feel a little weird. What advice can you give to our listeners when maybe considered a potential early sign that they may be developing a mental illness or something, they realize it's not right, but they don't know what to do?
Self-awareness, I think, is key to being able to notice changes within yourself. So it's necessary to be able to practice self-awareness and always be tuning that muscle, if I can say that. Because then when you do that, you notice whether you are sleeping more or less, whether you're eating more or less, whether you are agitated and irritable as opposed to goofy and bubbly like you typically are. And
Right.
if you aren't self-aware, you're not going to be able to see the signs. That's what makes it so challenging, is that everyone is different. So the signs and symptoms are going to be different in each person, but you're the only person that's in your body that knows how you feel, that knows what you're dealing with. So you have to really kind of get place where you're able to self-evaluate on a regular basis, so that if something changes, you can see it as quickly as you possibly can, or you get to the point where you can see it coming and do something about it. So I would say self-awareness is key when you're doing well and when you're not doing well.
Yeah, to know your highs and know your lows. Are there ways for people to practice being more self-aware? Are there exercises people can do?
Yeah, there's more formalized exercises. I think it's called Johari's window. So you can go online and you can actually fill out the characteristics that you think are for yourself. And then you can have your friends, you could just set text to your friends for them to fill it out too, because it brings you aware of what you know about yourself, what other people know about you, what you don't know about yourself, and you can compare all of those aspects together. A less formal way to practice self-awareness is just becoming an observer in your own life.
Right.
So observing how you respond and react when your boss tells you to do something, or if you get into an argument with your partner, how is it that you handle when you're frustrated with your kids? And that's you practicing self-awareness as you kind of look at your life and the way that you used to handle things and how you handle things now, as well as how you would ideally like to deal with and handle things, and what is required of you to be in that place.
So it's just really paying attention to your mental health. Just when you break it down, thank you for doing that. Every guest I have on does a great job at simplifying things for our listeners. But, we're on the topic of mental health now. I want to hear your three most important things. So only three, because what three things can our listeners start to do on a daily or short-term basis to improve their mental health? They're ready to make that jump. What do you got for them?
I love this question because I think that everything has to be broken down to the 24 hours in the day that we have. Everyone has 24 hours. And I was just listening to Jim Quick this morning, and he was saying that, if we woke up with 86K, in the morning, and we had to spend that, or else it was going to get lost, how would you spend that money? And so we have 24 hours in a day to spend a certain way. And how we spend that time is going to really dictate our experience and the progress we make toward our larger goals. So I feel like people get stuck because they're thinking too big without breaking it down into smaller pieces. On a
Right.
daily basis, a person can come up with rituals and routines. So that might be a morning routine that's specific to you at this time in your life. My morning routine changes regularly, but there needs to be something in place, whether it's writing, whether it's praying, meditating, playing with your dog, checking in with your kids,
Right. Right.
talking to your partner, whatever that looks like. So building a strong morning routine, I think, is key. Another thing that could be really helpful to do on a daily basis would be to have some level of practicing presence, paying attention. You can pay attention at any moment. Right now, during this podcast, if you're listening, pay attention to how you feel right now. You know, what's going on in your body? What are you thinking about? And that's one way to be able to raise your level of self-awareness. And the last thing that I would suggest is getting outside. So we were meant
Like
to
that. Yep.
be active as human beings, right? Like cave people, they had to fend all day long. You know, people are
Yes.
freaking out
Yes.
right now, but it's like, this is what life used to look like, is that every single day you had to go out and be active in order to eat and to live. So because we live kind of like cushy lives now with temperature control and we have cars, we still have to be active, you know, whether that's walking, whether it's cleaning the house, whether that's, you know, standing outside and letting the sun hit your face. Those are the three things that I would highly suggest on a daily basis so that you can live your best life.
Yeah, I agree with all those things 100%. Something's got to be normalized in your day as an entrepreneur. You know, my days are always different, but I wake up and I make my bed every day. It's one of my constants. I have learned over time that I can go a lot of days in a row working, but what works for me is mental health breaks. You know, I find time to fold my laundry or, you know, make food or do 15 minutes of abs on the floor, you know, something just to take my eyes off the computer, and you get, you know, more longevity and productiveness, at least for me. But
Yeah, that's great.
let's look deeper here. Just said long-term commitments. What are two longer-term commitments our listeners can make to create a healthier mindset?
I think the longer term commitments are a combination of the daily routine. So you can say, in the long term, I want to practice consistency, right? So I would like to consistently make my bed on a daily basis or give myself a mental health break once a day. And then what does that look like in being able to reinforce that behavior for yourself? So I think consistency, based on, you know, knowing why it is you're doing what you're doing, can be really helpful. And then the second longer term thing would be support. So for everyone, that might look a little bit different. It might be your best friend that is your accountability partner. Now you have to find safe support. Don't, you know, elicit the support of someone who's not nice to you and kind of beats you down when you try to tell them what your dreams are.
Right.
Finding the right support that is emotionally safe and helpful is going to be key to helping you to be consistent, because they're going to keep cheering you on. They're going to give you new ideas and help you brainstorm when you get stuck. So consistency and support are the two longer term commitments someone can make to themselves to really feel like they're making progress.
I'm all about that, especially consistency when it comes to your sleep and um, diet regimen. Doesn't happen overnight. Every week is a big check mark. And the support group I'm all about, you know, after my accident, I had my family to rely on, my close Tampa family. I called them my support group, and that helps you leaps and bounds. Having someone to look out for you, even a mentor figure, I feel everybody should have someone looking out for them, and, you know, also be doing the same, paying it forward and creating that circle. So I love the consistency. You've been doing a lot, you know, 10 year in Las Vegas, doing a lot. What are some ways that you're going to start raising some more awareness for the importance of mental health in the future? What are we working on?
So right now I'm actually pivoting into mental health and money a little bit. I've realized that a lot of therapists don't necessarily address that, which makes sense because we're not financial professionals. So my goal is not to be giving anyone financial advice, but I do realize that a lot of clients have finances as one of their stressors and a barrier to them kind of making progress. So if we know finances are 80% behavior, well, I could talk about behavior because I've studied psychology and all that fun stuff. So helping clients to really break through their money beliefs, break through their mindset. And really at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with your own personal growth when we start talking about finances, because you have to evaluate all the things, all the building blocks that came together to create this barrier between you and what you're really capable of doing and achieving. Because I love to work with young entrepreneurs and millennials and help them to
Yes.
kind of create generational wealth and be the change in their family tree that's going to really make a difference. So I'm pivoting into that, trying to share more information and potentially write a book and things like that. So that's coming in the next, few months or so. But either way,
Yeah.
I'm still always sharing mental health tips and tricks on social media and things like that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how you go about that with the mental health and money. I think that might be a nice platform for a podcast. There's definitely going to be a lot of people who would be interested in hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. Maybe I'll have to have you come on as a guest.
I'd love to do that. So I think that's also a perfect segue to saying thank you for coming on the show. I know our guests are going to see all the value in your episode. I love how you broke the 24 hours down. How are we going to spend that 24 hours? You gave a lot of great advice for improving self-awareness. And I also like your commitment to others. You're working on ways to educate the next generation. But it's time for the last word here. I'll do this on my other podcast too, what it's really like to be an entrepreneur, because I want our listeners to really get to know my guests. Is there something that you want to share with everybody listening on that we did not get to touch on yet?
I think that it speaks a little bit to, how you found yourself in the line of work that you're doing now. You know what I mean? Having gotten to the point where you're pretty much like facing the end of your life. I think that it's really important to keep in mind that, nothing is ever promised. So if today were the last day of your life, how would you go about your day? Like, what would you say to the people that you care about? How would you interact with strangers? And I think that when we can keep that in mind, it really can shift us to a place of gratitude and put things in perspective as far as what we hope to do and accomplish. So that's kind of the crux of everything that I do and try to share about. And it sounds like it's part of your story and
Yes,
what
yes.
you've experienced. So that's the last thing that I can kind of leave with everyone to think about is today were the last day of your life. How would you want it to go? Who would you want to be as a person,
I love how you mentioned the gratitude. Gratitude is what keeps it going. But
Definitely.
you mentioned before social media. Why don't you share your professional social media, your website, or your ways for our listeners to follow your endeavors, seek your advice, seek your services?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, and my handle on there is Jacent's Gems, because the name of my podcast, JACENTSGEMS. So I'm most active on there. I am also starting the mental health underscore money page on Instagram, where I will be sharing more about the financial side of things and how to demystify our messed up money beliefs. And I also have a website, which is Wamala Wellness, WAMALA wellness.com, where I have a blog and different things like that. It's linked to the YouTube channels. And so I'm just always trying to push out as much content as possible to help people, be exposed to new information, open up their minds, and try new things to see, what helps them to feel like they're living a more fulfilled life.
I appreciate you sharing all that. Everybody listening on, be sure to check out that value and that content she's posting each day. And be sure to check out the show on Instagram and Facebook at A Mental Health Break and on Twitter at Podcasts by Lanci. I'm at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube, and my website is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, on Amazon now. But DM me or email me. I want to hear what you think. If you like today's episode, please continue listening and rate A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering guests for you on each episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all on the next episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci.